And of course there is a question to you. Can you accept the question? From Mr. McGuinness, Mrs. McGuinness.
Thank you. I've listened to this debate, and in the interest of fairness, perhaps you would pass on my email address to all of those lobbyists from industry that have lobbied you, because I'm on the Environment Committee and I have not received any of that. I have, on the other hand, received a great deal of lobbies from people who are very concerned about fracking, and I take on board their concerns, but I do think you do a disservice to this debate by making it a suggestion that, first of all, we can be influenced unduly by any lobbyist, and secondly, that it has all been in one direction. There is a question in there somewhere, sir.
Okay, Madam Anderson.
Thank you. I urge Member States not to authorise any new hydraulic fracturing operations in the EU. It is clear from past experience in countries such as America and from studies that fracturing does pose unacceptable risks to the environment, to public health and to local constituents, at a time when really we should instead be investing in renewables such as wave and wind, of which we have a lot of in Ireland. Research shows, and government has had to admit, like government in Poland, that companies and governments almost always nearly overestimate shale gas deposits in order to support their actions. Notwithstanding the environmental impact caused by emissions created by fracturing, the considerable amount of constituency concern is entirely understandable, given the very real risk posed by fracking to both the agriculture and to tourism in places of beauty like Fermanagh. So these two sectors are very vitally important to the Irish economy, and given its current fragile state, it is absolutely baffling that corporate interests should really outweigh the interest of the citizen.
The last speaker is Mrs. McGuinness.
Thank you, Chairman. I came to this debate as perhaps one of the undecideds, and I'm afraid it's been so polarised I remain to be convinced. But let's deal with some of the facts here and the reports we're dealing with. I urge people to read the reports, and read in particular the Environment Committee report, which is extremely balanced and takes into account many of the concerns. But let's also recognise that Article 194(2) states very clearly that Member States are sovereign when it comes to their energy mix and their energy choice. I've received a great deal of lobbying only on one amendment, and that relates to whether we should urge Member States to place a moratorium on fracking. And I will only speak for my own Member State. We have not issued exploration licences. We have some licensing options to explore the potential, but the Government and Minister have said very clearly that they will do nothing until they see research, and that will not be available until 2014. And I do think we need to look at all of the risks and evidence that is there, and therefore I'm questioning whether we need to vote on this amendment for a moratorium, given that in many Member States there already is a de facto moratorium in place.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam President. I was very happy to support these proposals, and without any doubt, without laws we can't have order throughout the European Union, and it's very important that we have proper monitoring of these rules and that they're implemented fairly. And as well as that, the Commission has to be quicker when it fines when these powers are not being actually implemented. But there's another side to the story as well. Sometimes there are authorities in the countries themselves who are being too severe, and particularly on people such as farmers or fishermen, who are getting terrible penalties and sanctions, and this is because they have done something actually by accident and not deliberately. So we need to have these laws implemented fairly.
So Mr. Murphy has the floor.
The dangers of fracking to the environment and to public health are so serious, in my opinion, that they cannot be regulated for. That's why I signed the amendment seeking a total ban, and when that amendment was defeated I voted against the report as a whole. Incredibly, the water used for one single well for fracking would supply 10,000 Europeans with water for a whole year. And a recent German study states that the global warming footprint of shale gas extracted at a depth of 1,000 metres is 30% larger and is twice as large for gas obtained 2,500 metres down compared to natural gas. This environmentally dangerous practice must be banned. It's precisely the same big oil, big gas companies that have already made super profits and have already endangered our environment who now tell us that shale gas is safe, there's no problem. They simply cannot be trusted. Instead of relying on them, the public sector must become the spearhead of investment into research and development and infrastructure to develop green energy production. This can be financed through taking the massive accumulated profits of both big oil into democratic public ownership. Thanks.
Mrs Harkin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I must say I regret that the amendment that I co-signed requesting Member States to act on the precautionary principle and not to authorise any fracking was not carried. And while I understand this is a Member State competence, nonetheless I believe it would have been a strong signal from this Parliament. I think we need to take into consideration the views of the Environment Commissioner, who just yesterday evening spoke in this Parliament, and where he said that there are gaps in European legislation. And he has confirmed that the Commission will carry out an impact assessment in 2013, part of which will be a public consultation. At least that will give citizens and give the public a chance to have an input and to make their views known. In my own constituency, there are plans to drill exploratory wells for fracking, and very many people have real concerns about the environment, about human and animal health. The poor record of fracking in the US gives us every reason to be concerned, and there is no proper framework in place to ensure the protection of the environment and the protection of human and animal health.
Thank you, Mrs Harkin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I voted against this report, which is largely supportive of fracking and which sees fracking as a core element of the European energy mix. The report does not consider the precautionary principle and is way too optimistic in regard to fracking. Just yesterday in this chamber, the Environment Commissioner himself spoke about the risks from fracking and said that they were higher than those from conventional gas exploration. He also said that there are significant gaps in EU legislation in regard to fracking. In my view, these gaps include the need for a mining directive, the necessity to expand the remit of the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, and gaps in the Water Framework Directive. In my own constituency, there are very serious concerns in regard to fracking and its consequences on animal and human health, the destruction of the landscape and damage to our clean green image. Finally, we are facing a fossil fuel cliff globally. Shale gas may have postponed the awful day, but our energy mix in the future will not be fossil fuel based. We need to direct our energies and our resources to sustainable, renewable energy sources.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr Kelly.
Thank you. I was present yesterday in Parliament during the entire debate for 3 hours on this issue of shale gas. I didn't really get... I stayed for the entire time, even though unfortunately I didn't get the chance to speak, although a number of other MEPs got the chance to speak using the blue card. But I voted with my group on this report.
Diverse points made, it was very difficult to come to a balanced conclusion. But certainly there are concerns, particularly regarding the environmental aspects of shale gas, etc. But I think of all the speeches I've heard, the one by Kay Swinburne was probably the most balanced. It's a matter for the Member States. We have to allow for research. We have to allow for development. That's why I welcome in particular the oral amendment today, where all stakeholders are to be consulted before the Commission makes its report next year.